like to welcome you to our next episode in conversation, Plain Spoken Grace. We're coming to you today from Columbia, Tennessee. We're in a place called Two Lanes Guest House, Mike Wolf's place in Columbia, Tennessee, and it's a great spot for us to sit down and visit with our guest, Don Moen. So Don, thank you for joining us. It's great to see you.
Great to be here with you today, Chip. Thanks.
It's a real pleasure. And you brought your wife with you. I think that's great. I appreciate you doing that.
Well, I mean, Nashville is just, 45 minutes up the road from Columbia here. So that was kind of fun. I said, hey, you want to take a ride with me down there? So yeah, it was fun.
Here.
Yeah.
You've been married for how long?
Well, this month. Yeah. It'll be 48 years.
Good for you. And where did you all meet?
We met at Oral Roberts University. I had transferred in. I was on a violin scholarship. Violin is my major instrument.
Yeah.
And that's what put me through school. I was at a state university in University of Southern Mississippi. Get this, I'm from northern Minnesota.
Correct.
North of Duluth.
Right.
Okay, if anybody knows where that is. And I say that there are Norwegians, Swedes, and other fur-bearing animals living up there. And I went to Hattiesburg, Mississippi on a violin scholarship. And it's like, man, I sat in my English class for about 2 weeks before I understood what language are they speaking.
Absolutely.
When I was a kid, we would take one trip a year down from Two Harbors, Minnesota, which is north of Duluth, right on Lake Superior, to see our relatives in Minneapolis. Uh-huh. And as far as I was concerned, Minneapolis was the Deep South.
Right.
That's what I thought. Boy, people do talk funny down here in Minneapolis. Uh-huh. And then I find myself in Hattiesburg, of all places. So anyway, I had left a state school and had just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I knew I just didn't want to play violin only the rest of my life. So I transferred into ORU. Right. And on a violin scholarship still. But that's where I got interested in, different kinds of music, Christian music. Yeah. Started playing guitar and stuff, and that's my last semester there was Laura's first semester. So I met her. Yeah. My roommate was on the tennis team, and I was a decent player. I was having a decent game with him, and there were like 4 courts in a row, and we'd be having a serious match, and this ball would dribble onto our court. And I go, what? And these 2 girls are down the other court. I'd take the ball and flip it back over there. We'd have a serious game. Next thing you know, the ball's coming. What in the world? And I'd flip it over, and these girls are practicing tennis like badminton.
Yeah, sure.
And then I
probably having more fun than you all.
After about the 4th time, I looked at and I saw this girl. They were sisters, but I saw the girl. I was, boy, she's pretty cute. Yeah. As it turned out, I got behind her in the cafeteria the next day, and I said, the tennis pro. Yeah, there you go. And that's how it kind of started.
How about that?
Yeah. So in May 19th, we'll be married 48 years.
Good for you. How about that? I know. Exactly.
Got married after a concert, May of 73 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was traveling with a group called Living Sound, which is a kind of an evangelistic missionary group. And we had a Saturday night concert. And after the concert, it was at a theater there. Yeah. And the evangelist said, tonight, following the concert, there'll be the wedding of our guitarist and his fiancée. And you're all welcome to stay. So I had about 1,000 people at my wedding that I didn't know. Right. It started at 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. Had the whole band there. We played, and Laura and I had Sunday off and Monday off, and Tuesday night we're singing in Des Moines, and we're staying with the home of the Nesbitts, and they, we got to their house, and they said, "Oh, how long have you been married?" And we said, "Oh, 2 days." Yeah. and we just kept traveling.
That's good.
Oh, it's fun.
That's great. That's great. How old were you when you picked up a violin, and how were you introduced to it?
The violin. Well, that's interesting. I was in grade school in Two Harbors, Minnesota, and this guy named Dave Rubinoff came up from Minneapolis. I still can't believe he did it, but he brought his violin, and all these little kids are sitting, with their legs crossed on a gymnasium floor.
Right.
And he got up and he did funny things with his violin, like he would, you can make the bow kind of go, and so he'd kind of like, I'm eating my violin.
Yeah.
It's like, and he played a song called "The Hot Canary," and as a little kid, I was like, "Wow, that's cool." And I came home and I told my mom I want to play violin, and I was in the third grade, and I think they got me a violin, or maybe the school provided one. I can't remember.
Right.
But I started taking lessons, and it's like I had no intention that I was going to be a violinist for the rest of my life. But but it kept opening doors for me.
Right.
And I eventually, I didn't want to play violin anymore, and because I was embarrassed. All my friends, when you get to be 8th grade or 9th grade, 7th, 8th, the boys are interested in sports.
Right.
And I rode through the alleys, carried my violin on my bicycle to go to my lessons, and I was kind of embarrassed, and I wanted to play basketball.
Yeah.
I was on the basketball team, but I was short.
Right.
Okay, I'm almost 6'3" now.
Yeah.
When I was on my first driver's license at age 16, my height was 5'5".
Yeah.
And 110 pounds.
Right.
So I was one of the shorter kids in school, and I didn't start growing until I was in college.
Right.
But I was short, and yet I just wanted to play basketball so bad, so I quit violin, and my violin teacher would come at basketball practice, and he'd sit there and on the sidelines, and he'd go, "Don, you're making a bad mistake." And Coach Vingy was his name.
Yeah.
Coach Vingy said, and I was never going to be a great player, first string. I was short, but I loved it so much. But he said, "Don, my mother begged me to play violin." And so I started playing violin, and I quit for basketball. And he said, "I regret it to this day."
Interesting.
My coach, Coach Vingy was his name.
Yeah.
But so I went back to playing. I quit basketball, and I went back to studying music again. And then I won different awards, and that's how I got to Mississippi. I was playing.
Well, it's so funny to hear you tell that, because I want to share something with you. When I was in, I think it was 4th grade in Williamsburg, they did I didn't even know what they were doing, but somebody set up for all the kids in that grade to be tested for whether they had musical aptitudes or not. And if you did, you were selected, and you could take violin lessons.
Yeah.
And so,
wow.
It's the first time I think I ever did better than a C on anything of a test that I took. And I was, given that opportunity. And I remember getting a violin at that age. I'm a short, pudgy kid with a violin. And I was telling Doug this the other day.
That's funny.
I remember putting an STP sticker on the outside of my hard case because I was trying to man it up a little bit. Because, and I had a dad who played college football, and I had a brother who was just razzing me about the violin, and sadly, I did it for a couple of years and then let it go. And I look back at it and I think, I wish I had not. I wish I had continued to pursue it.
Well, and my coach told me, he said, sports is important right now.
Yeah.
He said, and let me tell you, there's a 99% chance you're not going to play professional sports.
Correct.
But playing violin is something you can do into your 80s.
Yes.
And I was practicing my violin last night.
Yeah.
And I love playing it. I'm actually practicing more now than I have for years.
Sure.
Being in Nashville, we've got a lot of great fiddlers. Oh gosh, such great fiddlers. And I was trained classically.
Right.
So, but to play fiddle, that's another thing. It's all kind of in the wrist. And so I've been practicing, and I, somebody told me.
Do you ever look at some of those fiddle players and think, boy, the mechanics are awful, but what you're hearing is,
Well, I look at some of the fiddle players. I listen to them, and I'm saying, I'm never picking up the fiddle again. They're so good. That's the thing about being in Nashville or around a lot of professional musicians, they're so good.
Right.
And that it's like, it can be intimidating, like, what am I doing? I think about that when I get on the stage to sing.
Right.
It's like, I hear phenomenal singers. I'm thinking, what am I doing here?
Right.
And I've been on the stage with a lot of talented singers, my heroes. And just before I go on to sing, I'm going, wow. In one ear, I hear, you better dial it up, Don Moen, because Don Moen is not enough.
Right.
And then in the other ear, that's, I think, the Holy Spirit saying, you be yourself.
There you go.
And that's the one thing that finally got me over being so intimidated, because I can't do what these other singers can do, but guess what? They can't do what I do.
There you go.
So when I teach people, I just say, if you forget everything I said to you, be yourself. This comes if you're a pastor, if you're a worship leader, if you're a businessman, if you're
that's great advice.
Attorney, anything. And with the internet these days and YouTube, you can see all these phenomenal things, and you begin to compare yourself to that.
Right.
And the temptation is to try to emulate them.
Yeah.
And in my field, which is leading music and worship leading, man, you got so many great things you can look at, but some of the churches I go to, everybody's kind of dressed the same as the YouTube video. They're looking the same, they're doing the same, and it's like, wait a minute, this is not going to translate to your church.
Interesting.
Your church may be 200 people. So you got to look at your audience. You got to know who your audience is. And it's like, man, but one of the most important things is to be yourself. God will never anoint who you want to be. He anoints who you are.
How about that?
You start there.
Yeah,
if
that's
you can
great
become
advice.
Comfortable in your own skin, I don't care what you're doing, in any profession.
Right.
But that's authenticity. And that's what's going to connect with people.
Right.
Being authentic. And so that's what I tell the people all the time. Just be yourself. And when I finally came to grips with that, I realized, okay, I can only be Don Moen. That's who I can be. Yeah. But at least I can walk in my own anointing and not somebody else's. Yeah. Because people can smell a phony miles away.
They really can.
I was leading worship one time several years back in Florida at this little church. And not so little, but I try to hang out at the front as much as possible, but if I can just talk to the people. And this guy came up to me, and he came walking down the aisle, and he had a lot of tattoos, a cut-off T-shirt, leather, chains, and I thought, and he had a girl behind him dressed the same. Mm-hmm. And he came up to me, he goes, "You." And I'm thinking, you. I like what you do. You come across real.
There you go.
My woman here, she likes it too. And he turned around and walked away. I'm going, and I'm sure they got on 2 Harleys and rode away.
Exactly.
But it's like that. I never forgot about that.
Yeah.
It's the guy. It really touched me that what I did. Somehow, I might not have been the greatest singer, the greatest keyboard player, but what I did connected to that guy.
Well, people want to see that authenticity in you, and people can, as you said, they can detect it. Yeah. I think they really can.
So just be yourself.
Absolutely.
That's the advice I can give to anybody.
Absolutely. So you start off with the violin.
Yep.
When and how do you pick up some of these other instruments?
Well, my piano was the first instrument. Okay. My mother, I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters, and my mother forced us to play the piano. Right. I mean, it wasn't an option. You will play 6 years of piano. And I hated it. Yeah. But every week we had a lesson, and every day we had to practice 30 minutes, and sometimes I'd pound the keys. And I hate piano. And my mother said, "Donnie, You wear the clothes we provide for you. You eat the food we provide for you. You sleep in the bed we provide for you. You will play the piano. And I thought then, I said, if I ever grow up and get married and have a family of my own, I will never abuse my children like this.
Right.
Well, guess what?
Yeah.
We have 5 children, and they all heard the same speech, and they all had to take 6 years of piano.
There you go.
But piano, I tell you what, again, there you go. Thank God for my mom who forced me to do that.
Right.
Had I known that I'm going to be doing what I'm doing today, I would have practiced harder.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But it gave me a basic understanding of music. It's a good foundation.
Right.
And it was good discipline.
Right.
And you realize when you're younger and start taking piano, that's one thing, but most kids drop out. And then you get into like high school and you realize nobody can play anything, and suddenly you can play something. So, like I say, my kids have all had to take 6 years of piano. And
was there an instrument that was more difficult for you to learn on than another? Or?
They all kind of, violin is a difficult instrument to learn, but I mean, you've got to have a good ear. Piano was a basic, and going through high school, I played 3 instruments, a little bit of guitar, but mostly a violin, piano, and trombone was my minor instrument. So I played in the marching band, and I played in the jazz band until my mother encouraged me to quit. Yeah. She goes, Donnie, they play music with a beat. Yeah. I was raised really conservative. Okay. Sure. No movies. Yeah. I never went to a movie until I was 18 years old. Right. Away at college in Mississippi. Okay. And I prayed for 5 days. And I went down Hardy Street. I walked down to the theater, and I got to this, because my mother told me, if Jesus comes back and you're in that theater, you ain't going to heaven. Wow. And then I went into the theater and I watched this movie called The Sound of Music. How about it? and so you got to understand, I mean, I watched it 3 times in a row. Sure. Because I was like, I was just like, wow. Yeah. And yet, because I was raised so conservatively, movies and dancing, no dancing. Oh boy! When they had square dancing in the school, I had to sit on the side. I didn't understand it, but my mother would give a note. It's against Donald's religion to dance. I never quite square dancing. Yeah, I didn't quite understand it, but when it came down, I was playing trombone in the jazz band, and she goes, Donnie, they play music with a beat. Yeah, and when they play music with beat, people dance. Right. And when people dance, bad things happen. Oh boy. Yeah. So it was like, so I'm not telling you to quit, but your brother Denny quit, Cheryl Tiemann quit, and so quit, all in the church. Yeah. And so I quit, and I regret, what kind of a testimony was that to my schoolmates? But you got to understand, that's what I was raised in. And she was being who she was. Yeah, and it's not, because she came out of a fairly secular, she got saved. Right. My mother got saved. Dad and Mom were married, I think, in a United Church or something. And my grandmother gave her life to Christ in a little full gospel church. Mm-hmm. And then my mother did. Mm. And then all my dad knew is that one day Mom could wear earrings and makeup and go out to a dance, and the next day she couldn't do any of that stuff, and she'd always dump out his beer. Yeah. It's like I look back on those days and I think Dad could have come around a lot sooner. Had Mom been a little more compassionate, right? But she was really zealous, and it wasn't all good, but there are a lot of good that came out of it. Yeah. I remember Sunday night when those doors, Wednesday and Sunday, when the doors were open, we were there.
Yeah.
And Sunday night, now I'm showing my age, but Bonanza was on.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
And you want to watch Bonanza.
Oh, yeah. It
Yeah.
came right at about the time youth group was starting.
Right.
I was sitting with my sister, Diane, my little sister, and my mom came down, she goes, "It's time for church." And my sister said, "Mom, we don't want to miss the last episode of Bonanza."
Yeah.
And she goes, and when Mother got serious, she kind of talked with her teeth like this.
Yeah, yeah.
She goes, "Well, I just hope you don't miss heaven someday." Needless to say, we
right.
missed Bonanza and went to church.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, and those are the days when you couldn't tape it and watch it later or whatever else. But
but you know,
do you watch the old
Oh,
Bonanza?
sure I do.
Yeah, sure.
But it wasn't as limiting as it was.
Mm-hmm.
I still thank God for
Sure.
because she was so strict. It kind of set me apart.
Yeah.
And when a lot of the kids my age, and you get around 15, 16 years old, there's definitely kind of a parting of the ways. I mean, you're going to either choose to go with the crowd, or you're going to stand away from the crowd. So I thank God for my church. I thank God for the roots that I was plugged into there.
Sure.
And my mom didn't always do it the right way, but she the fact that she had us there all the time, I think saved me from a lot of things.
Sure. So you're at Oral Roberts.
Yeah.
You're playing the violin.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go from there to getting into the music that you're doing in your career? Yeah. And I mean, tell me a little bit about how that even gets started.
I was playing violin and learning, getting a little more interested in guitar and bass guitar, just exposed to other kinds of music. See, I left the University of Southern Mississippi because everybody, that's all I was doing, was playing violin. Mm-hmm. I was playing in the Jackson Symphony, the Jackson Opera, the Jackson Ballet, the Mobile Symphony, the Mobile Ballet, Mobile Opera, the Gulf Coast Symphony Orchestra, the New Orleans. And every day I was traveling somewhere a couple hours away to a rehearsal or to a concert. Yeah. And I almost lived in a tuxedo and tails. Mm-hmm. So, and it was just like, and the people that I would talk to, they're interested in this concerto or this musical piece or all this stuff. And I like to hunt and I like to fish and I like to work on cars. Yeah. All those things. And it's like, wait, I got a broader perspective than this. And so I left at the end of the middle of my sophomore year. We were playing an opera called Carmen. Mm-hmm. And at intermission, I told my violin teacher, I'm gonna leave and go to Minnesota. I'm gonna quit. And he said, "Don, you're making the worst mistake of your life." But after that concert, I was still in my tux with a starchy collar. And I got in and got in my car and drove straight through to northern Minnesota, got in a blizzard, and I got there and I quit. Yeah. Put on my flannel shirt and I got a job logging. Right. At the Coet Logging Company. Uh-huh. And logging and it's January now. Sure. In the north, in northern Minnesota. Right. So it's like 30 below zero. Oh, sure. And I'm logging with these guys that I'm thinking perhaps some of them might have been on the America's Most Wanted. Uh-huh. They're a rough bunch of lumberjacks. Yeah. But I'm driving a bulldozer and I'm out in the woods and after several weeks of that, I thought maybe playing violin isn't the worst thing in the world. Right. So I went back I was driving back to pick up late for the semester in Mississippi, and I pulled off the side of the road about 10 miles from the school. And I thought, I can't do this. And I made a U-turn, started heading north. And that's how I ended up going to, those days there was no cell phones or anything. No. So after about a week, the school called my mother and father and said, "Where's Don?" Yeah. "Well, he's there." Yeah. "No, he's not." So then they had the highway patrol looking for me. Oh boy. And I didn't know what to tell my parents. So I just was wandering around. And that's how I went through Tulsa and ended up auditioning on my violin. But I just kind of still kept traveling around, and so that's where. And then eventually I went back to school there, and I was sitting, I went to a concert on campus with a group called Living Sound, and heard an evangelist named Terry Law, who was really one of my mentors and married Laura and I 48 years ago.
Right.
And they just come back from Africa, Southern Africa. And I heard them singing, and I heard the stories, and I thought, I had this strange feeling like this is what I'm supposed to do.
There you go.
And there was a group at the same time called Love Song. I don't know if you know those guys, but they were out of the Jesus movement out of California, and they were rock and roll kind of, and they were playing in parks. And I just was like, wow, okay, Lord, I surrender. I'll go anywhere you want me to go, and I'll do anything you want me to do. I just feel I'm supposed to do this. So I quit school, and I got on a bus to go on tour, and got off 10 years later, pretty much.
Right.
I started traveling all over the world.
Right.
And my father said, how much are they paying you? I said, nothing. We had to raise our support.
Sure.
So for 10 years, that's what we did. And that's how I learned to arrange and orchestrate. And,
right.
And we didn't have a lot of money. We raised our support. On a good month, Laura and I were married. We kept traveling. And on a really good month, we would maybe have $500 come in between the two of us. Mm-hmm. But we stayed in people's homes.
Sure.
Slept on couches.
Yeah.
Slept on their guest bed, and did about 3 concerts a day, a morning concert, an afternoon's concert in school, and an evening concert at a church or an auditorium. And then we would pray for people. We'd counsel with them. We'd go home, and I'd sleep on somebody's couch or guest bed. Next day, get up and do the same thing. About 350 days a year, 330 days a year, we did that.
Yeah.
So that's for 10 years.
Yeah,
So it's like 1,000 concerts a day for 10 years. That's and not making any money. And so after 10 years, I remember Laura and I got off the road. We were going to try to buy this house in Tulsa, where the group was, and it was $49,000.
Right.
And I went in to be approved for the loan, and I got laughed out of the mortgage office. They said, "Sir, you have lived below the poverty level for the last, according to your taxes, below the poverty level for the last 10 years."
Right.
Which was less than $7,000 a year. That was the poverty level, I guess. And how do you expect to pay for this $49,000 house? So I got kicked out of the mortgage office, and I never felt poor during those days because we were rich in relationships.
Sure.
I mean, you take a dart and throw it at a world map, and wherever it lands, there's a good chance that I've stayed on somebody's couch.
Yeah.
When you do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I have friends all over the world because of it.
Yeah.
And it also, those days, those years, I think made Don Moen into who I am. You don't take yourself so seriously anymore.
Right.
And nowadays, you can create incredible art, musical art in a vacuum with just a Pro Tools rig or just a home studio.
Yeah.
But then you get up there in front of people and on a stage, and you don't have anything to give.
Right.
So those years, God used all those years to develop my character. To understand what it means to serve. It was like a boot camp and Bible school all in one.
So I don't have the benefit of this because I've not performed musically.
Yeah.
When you are on stage and each setting is different, are you reading the crowd?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the first...
Does that start when you're backstage, or does it start when you come out, or,
It starts when I'm, first of all, I mean, when I talk about this, I say one of the most important things to understand as a worship leader is to understand your audience.
Yeah.
And not only a worship leader, but any kind of business you're in. you better understand who your audience is.
That's a good point as well. You're right.
Or you're going to miss the mark.
You will.
In my situation, if, what am I, what do you want? Who is the audience? I'll usually ask the promoter, well, it's a seniors banquet.
Yeah.
Well, okay, then I better know that my music's going to have to be a little different than a youth conference.
Right.
Okay. But and knowing the audience, and I think that's part of it. Years ago, when I would teach about this, I would say to worship leaders, worship and don't lead. And my friend Jack Hayford, I was out at his church, he took an issue. He goes, Don, that's fine for you to say that, worship and don't lead. But when you say that to somebody who is really getting started, that means get up on the stage and close your eyes and have your own private time of worship. But he said, you need to understand who your audience is. You need to watch the people and understand where they are. Right. And I tell people, don't look to the front 3 rows of the church because they're with you. Check out the motorcycle rider or the truck driver on the back row. Sure. Are you connecting with him or with her? Right. And those are the kind of things. But understanding the audience, that's communication. And I think that comes from years of just have the rough edges knocked off. Mm-hmm. Hey, I didn't stay in 5-star hotels. We stayed in homes. Sure. So when you stay in someone's home, night after night after night after night for 10 years, you kind of...
people in their homes feel comfortable enough to give you honest feedback about what their thoughts are or how much they appreciate what you're doing, and that helps to build your story and the character. Yeah, so that's part of what I think I do, and part of what any pastor or businessman can, whatever role you're in, you got to understand your audience. Because if you understand who they are, then you can come closer to hitting the mark. Yeah. So when your career starts to really take off. Yeah. It's funny, in my career, I never went after this. This is something I never wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Like, I wanted to be a violinist, but I never wanted to get in front of people and sing. When I was a senior in high school, the only 2 things that I checked off, I wanted to join the Navy because I wanted to be a Navy pilot. Yeah. And because I wore glasses, those days you could not get into flight school with glasses. Now you can. Yeah. Those days I was really discouraged about that, but I had a backup plan, and that was to be a forest ranger. Right. Because I like to hunt, being outdoors. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So great. So I had my career all ready for me. Yeah. If I couldn't be a Navy pilot, and that was right at the height of the Vietnam War. Right. But it's like, that's what I wanted to do. And then I said, well, I'll be a forest ranger then. And then I got an offer for a full ride at a university to study violin. So my dad said, well, I can't afford to send you to school, but if I'd say try it for a year. If you hate it that bad, you can join the Navy. How about it? So, the funny thing is, I did, when I quit school, I came back to those are the days of the draft lottery too. Mm-hmm. And I was so disappointed. The lottery number that I drew was 363. No kidding. June 29th is my birthday, and it was, I think, 363. And my brother's was like 361. And I was so disappointed because you don't think about it. As a kid, no. You just want to get out there. Yeah, well, the adventure I went to Lila McGowan, who was the gal who gave me, friend of the family in the little town of Two Harbors, where she was the clerk, worked in the county clerk's office. And I went down there and I said, Lila, what's the quota that you have fulfilled and for the draft this month? Right. She goes, we're going up to 295, number 295. And I said, have you fulfilled it all? She goes, no, we have 1 slot left to fill. I said, give me the papers, I'm signing up. So I filled out the papers to volunteer for the draft. Right.
And I went home and I told my father that night what I had done. And my father was, flew aircraft in World War II.
Yeah.
He's 95, he's still alive and well. But he's a vet, but he looked at me at the supper table. He goes, "Do you realize that this is an unwinnable war?" That's what Dad told me.
Yeah.
And he got up, only time I've ever seen my dad do this, he got up from the table and he walked off and never said another word to me that night. And so the next day, I went down to Lila McGowan at the county courthouse.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, Lila, I talked to Dad last night." She goes, I thought you probably would." And I said, "Have you sent that off yet?" And she goes, "Nope." I said, "Well, I think maybe I'll go back to college."
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I think she saved my life. When I think about it,
Sure.
this is 69. So, I don't know. I think about all those things, but how the Lord directed my steps. But I never, ever in a million years thought I would be doing what I'd be doing on a stage in front of people.
Right.
That's not that's the last thing I would want to do.
Right.
It's just not. It's not me. I'm much more of an introvert. People think I'm an extrovert. And someone said to me one time, "Don, you're an introvert being forced to play the role of an extrovert."
Right.
And a lot of people that are on stage are that way. They're really introverts.
Yep, that's true.
And so when we get into a room of people sometime, I get into a large room and I don't want to go into the room. And I said to Laura, "What do I do if somebody says hello to me?" She goes, "Just say hello."
Yeah.
Those kind of things. So
Yeah.
it's not the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing today is quite a miracle, because I'd never wanted to sing in front of people, never wanted to play the piano in front of people. And it's just, put me in an orchestra playing violin or something, it's okay.
Yeah.
But to play piano and sing.
Right.
So the way I got started was just, I had hired, when Terry Law was going out and doing these crusades, had 5 singers in the front, had a full band, and I was back on the piano, and I just put a microphone in front of the piano in case I needed to give some direction.
Sure.
And it was January 12th, I think, of 1983. And we were in Woodward, Oklahoma. They had the worst snowstorm they had had in 20 years. So there were like 5 or 6 inches of snow.
Yeah.
And we had about 25 people in the theater.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, Lenny LeBlanc and I sang at that exact theater.
Right.
And it's like, wow, boy, do I have memories of this. But I was sitting on that stage, and when the concert was kind of ended, I was at back of the piano, and I had a microphone, and I said, let's all sing that chorus one more time. And it's my shaky, quivery voice, and the song was "I Exalt Thee." I exalt thee. Oh gosh, it was so bad. And I think the people began to worship with me because they probably thought, that poor guy, he can't sing and he can't play. We better help him out.
Yeah, right.
So that was my illustrious beginning of this. But and after 2 concerts like that, we couldn't afford the band anymore. So it was just me and Terry Law.
Right.
And he would preach, and he'd have me get up there and sing. And I would tell you what, I was humiliated in front of several 100,000 people before I actually developed a style of doing something. But he forced me out there. And I tell people, everybody has people in their lives that will push you beyond your comfort zone.
They will, yeah.
And given the choice, I would have stayed back and done nothing. But somebody to kick my butt and get me out there beyond my comfort zone, God puts people like that in our lives.
Yes.
And you need to thank God for people like that.
Yes, you do.
They kick you out there. Are you qualified? Not really, but just being thrown off the deep end, going right into the fire. It's amazing what you will do being thrown out there. But there are people around you that will that'll put you in that situation. And I was fortunate enough to have men in my life that did that. They kicked my butt.
Right.
And I remember singing in Lakeland, Florida, after a concert. I had been playing. There's 5,000-6,000 people in this large church, and I think I was singing the song. We bring the sacrifice of praise. It was in E flat. I remember that because I could play in E flat.
Right.
And I just felt in my heart that it needed to lift a little bit. So for the musicians listening to us, I hit a B7 chord, and which puts you in the key of E. And I on piano I can't play it. The guitar players love the key of E because it's the open chord. Right. But piano, it's a lot of sharps, and I couldn't play in the key of E. So I just kind of thought. My whole life started to flash before my eyes. Sweat began to pour out in my underarms, my hands. And I just kind of lifted my hands like this, and I kind of sang through that verse. And then I hit a C7 chord, which puts me in the key of F, which I could play in. And I was hoping that people thought, my, he was so anointed, he couldn't even play that whole verse. And after that concert, I went to Terry Law, and I said, Terry, that's the last time. I'm not doing this anymore. Right. I have been humiliated in front of thousands of people. I just don't want to do it anymore. We're sitting at a Howard Johnson's, used to be there, Howard Johnson's Motel, right on I-4 in Lakeland. And he looked at me, and with like it was glasses, he goes, well, that's exactly what you need is a good swift kick in the rear to get you doing what God's called you to do. And that was the end of the conversation. Yeah. And he could have said, yeah, I understand. You don't have to do it anymore. But no, boom, kick my butt and get me out there doing it. So I thank God many, many, many times for guys like Terry who just pushed me beyond what I would have pushed myself. You know?
Well, that's one of the things that we're trying to do with these conversations in Plain Spoken Grace is encourage people who are maybe in a position like that, or they're going through some struggles in their lives, or they're at a crossroads to follow God's leading and to lean into some of these things and these opportunities and so forth. So thank you for sharing that. It's because people that have watched your career or they look at it now, most folks don't know about or remember those elements of those stories when that character is being built. Yeah. And what we've been through in those times when it's as challenging as it can be.
Well, and it's an important, like we have 3 boys and 2 girls, and all 3 of my sons have worked with me and working with me now. But I hired my son-in-law as my general manager, and he was really good at delegating and stuff like this. But it's like he handed my oldest boy, Michael, he said, "You're in charge of booking," and to Johnny, he said, "You're in charge of doing all the finances and all the taxes and all the book, and you're in charge of video." And it's like, and I said to Jesse, my son-in-law, I said, "You put Michael in charge of booking? He's never booked anything." Yeah. So you see, talking about putting people out of their comfort zone. Now, as a father, I know what my boy's potential was. Yeah. I would have never had him do that. Right. But yet, I'll never forget the day Michael called me and said, "Dad, I booked us all, the whole band. I signed a contract for $45,000. And I said, "Where?" He said, "Mauritius." I said, "Mauritius? Do you know where Mauritius is?" It's 2 hours off the coast of Madagascar in the middle of the Indian Ocean somewhere out there. Yeah. And I said, "Do you know how we're going to get to Mauritius?" I said, "Was it an all-in, like 45,000 all in, or was it 45,000 plus airfares?" "No, it's all in." I said, "Do you know what it's going to cost for us to get the band, all of us, to Mauritius?" Right. "Oh, about $45,000. And sure enough, I think it was 43,000 for airfares then. And I said, "You better find other bookings to offset the cost of this tour." And guess what? you're coming on the tour as a road manager. So when there's a mutiny with the band, I think Lenny LeBlanc might have been with me on that tour, but Michael booked that tour like it would be like booking a tour one night in Los Angeles, the next night in Paris, the next night in Miami, the next night in Dubai. That's the kind of flight we get on an airplane, fly 12 hours, and we were out for we traveled 13. We flew 13 days, 14 days, and did 13 concerts. Now, we didn't lose money on the tour, but Michael learned. But the thing is, because Jesse has kind of pushed these guys, now my boys are running the company, and they're doing great. And if it would have just been me, I know their limitations. I would have never done that. But God puts people like that.
And I've seen people who have both elements of their character. Some that are older that say they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. Well, how do you learn unless somebody says, do it? Yeah. And I mean, my oldest is building custom homes. And I remember when he first started, somebody telling me, well, how can he do that? He doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
And I thought to myself, well, how do you learn? You know?
And so
you learn just like you did, sitting there saying, I'm done with this. I'm not going to do this. I can't do this anymore. And then being pushed through it and so forth. So it's good to share. Good to share all that. Yeah. So you come from a conservative, your mom is very conservative. I'm assuming you're in church singing out of a hymnal. And all of a sudden there's this, I mean, I'm giving you a little bit of an outsider's in perspective, but there's this progression maybe of music and praise music and so forth. What does she think about that? And then it kind of explain it a little bit to the evolution of that to folks.
Well, my mother thought it was great. She was happy about it, but Dad not so much. And I wrote some jingles during that time too, or bank and automotive jingles. And that's what was kind of making some money for me. But my dad, rather than telling people he's leading worship, he would say, "Oh, he's writing jingles. He does radio and television." Funny, I've never heard still to this day, and Dad's 95, I've never heard him pray. And he's, I know he's proud of me, but he's never said that either. But he's Norwegian, you know, that generation.
More stoic.
Very, very stoic. And when he now Dad he's really quite proud of what I'm doing, and he critiques my music all the time. You don't need those drums and those electric guitars. Sing the hymns, Donnie. People like to sing the hymns. So Dad was confirmed in the Norwegian Lutheran Church. In my little town, there was a Norwegian Lutheran on one corner, and right across the street was the Swedish. It's actually called the Bethlehem Lutheran and Emmanuel Lutheran, but he calls it the Norwegian Church and the Swede Church. And but now he's proud of what I'm doing, and that's why I know the Lord has done a work in his life. He'll call and say, they're singing your music down there at the Swede Church today. Funny. But so Mom was all for it. Dad not so supportive in the early years, but it's over the years, Dad has, I think, realized that a lot of people have been touched and encouraged by my music, and to really help bless my dad for Father's Day, about 8 years ago now, I did a CD called Hymn Book, which was 16 classic hymns, and I didn't use. I dedicated it to him. And it's just me with an acoustic guitar, a guy singing tenor, and a girl singing alto, and a piano. So that's it. No, and I dedicated it to my father, and I said, "Here, Happy Father's Day," and you'll notice, I I didn't include drums. I took your advice, as I always have.
Yeah.
And there's no drums or no electric guitars on this CD.
That's
so
great.
Dad is kind of, and the funny thing is, it turns out it's been one of our most popular products.
Right.
Hymn books.
Right.
Singing Great is Thy Faithfulness and How Great Thou Art. And, all these simple, simple hymns. Mm-hmm. And people like them. And so Dad was right.
Yeah.
When I get up in that area and do a concert with a full band, he goes, "Why do you have to have a sound man that's deaf? You don't need those drummers, and these people come to hear you play your violin." That's my dad. Oh gosh, it's the funniest thing. But I've been out with, I had Tomlin up there, Chris Tomlin, and Sarah Groves, and all kinds of, and Sarah was singing it up there with me. He goes, "That girl you got singing with you there, she's too close to her microphone." This is my dad. Yeah. and I was actually having coffee with Sarah. Yeah. And I said, "It's my dad." He said, "You're singing too close to your microphone." Yeah. But it's like, and then I stopped picking up his calls. "Why don't you pick up my calls?" I said, "Because, Dad, I don't want to hear for the 50th time that I have a sound man that's deaf." But he's, "I'm just trying to help you."
Exactly.
So anyway, so this grew, and we got, suddenly, I was working still at Integrity, but I was starting to sing a lot.
Right.
And I would go out a couple times a year on international tours, and I'd walk out of I was the head of the label. Yeah. So music executive, in charge of all the productions and signing the artist and the songs. That's what I did for 20 years at Integrity Music. Right. So they came along just about the time when it was getting started, and I recorded a cassette then for them called "Give Thanks." We recorded it in May of '86, and it was released January of '87, and it went on to sell way over 1 million, maybe a couple million copies. Right. But that changed everything for me. And which is eventually what led me to come and join the label. That was before I was a part of the executive team. But it's like people started calling my house, and they wanted me to come and sing. And I'm thinking, do you know who I am? I mean, I don't think you really want me to come. And there was this black pastor that called me from New York. Yeah. Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is a very tough area in New York. Right. And they wanted me to come and be a part of their church dedication. And I could tell, he was a African-American pastor. And I said, "Do you know who I am?" Right. He goes, "I know exactly who you are. We don't want gospel, we want worship." I said, "All right." I said, "Do you know I'm pretty middle of the road and pretty laid back?" He goes, "I want you to come and just be Don Moen." There you go. And so I went up to that church, and in between services, I remember going out in the street. It was a sunny day in New York. I just took a walk down the street. I was a block and a half away from the church, and all of a sudden these guys come running after me from the church. He goes, "Brother Moen, I don't think you should be walking down these streets by yourself." Right. So anyway, things started growing. Sure. And that's when this whole artist thing, I said, I don't want to be that guy. Right. But I began to be that guy. And in March of 2007, I went over I was invited to go to, in 2005, I got an invitation from an official government invitation to Accra, to Ghana, to celebrate in March of 2007, 50 years of independence. Right. And I went and I just said, I think I'm supposed to do this. Giving thanks for 50 years. So I said yes to it. And when we got closer to the date, we went out and we flew. I walked out of a production meeting or a scheduling meeting as a music executive. You're busy all the time. Sure. And I didn't have this touring thing on the front of my radar all the time, but I got on an airplane and you walk in front of 65,000 people. Right. And when we landed in West Africa for the first time, I felt spiritually there was something different, darkness and some heaviness. And I knew we weren't prepared spiritually. And I told all the band, I said, find out, call everybody you know, text them, tell them to get praying. Because there's a different, it's not like flying to Dallas or Atlanta. There's a different vibe here if you've ever been to West Africa. And I just said, we got to pray. And there were a lot of hassles. My guitar player got electrocuted. I mean, he plugged there was a ground loop. He plugged his guitar in, and he couldn't let go of his guitar. And he fell down on the ground, and he was, because he had 220 volts going through him, he was flopping around on the stage like a bass in the back of a boat. And I kicked the guitar out of his hands.
Right.
And he just laid there limp. And I thought he was dead. And I picked him up, and I just held him and began praying for him. And he kind of came around. And it was intense. We went on 6 hours late when they finally fixed the ground loop. But it was on that tour that I realized the Lord really got my attention and said, you cannot just treat this lightly anymore. This is a platform that I've given you, and you better pay attention to it. And so after that tour, I decided I have to leave integrity and focus on this. Yeah. And so that's what I did. By December of 2007, I resigned, and stepped out into. I thought it would just be easy. Yeah. Just stepping out. And I even wrote a song. Still I believe there is more. I believe there is more. I believe. I was full of faith. And then the paychecks stopped coming in. And then I started writing songs. I find myself in uncharted territory. I never felt so lost. Never felt so lonely. Where are you, Lord? Yeah. And so, it's like, wow, this didn't go the way I planned it to go, but that kind of forced our move to Nashville from Alabama, from Mobile. Yeah. And it was the start of a new journey, and it wasn't easy, but I knew in my heart, I was a president of a label. I had a great job, a great salary, 5 kids in private school. Yeah. And it's like, I walked away from that. And Laura was in agreement with that too. But in my heart, I knew that I had to move on. I could have opted to stay there in a comfort zone. Right. I think that's where people get in trouble sometimes. They do. God is calling them to step out and do something new and trust him again. But it's scary. And you decide to stay where you are. And that's when men get in trouble. That's when David didn't go out in the spring when the kings went to battle. Right. King David, that's when he saw Bathsheba. That's when he fell into sin. Right. And it's like, as men, we've got to be willing to step out. And I thought to myself, what am I going to say to my children and my 3 boys and 2 daughters when they come to me one day and say, Dad, I really feel I need to step out and do this? Am I going to say, no, son, opt for security? No. And I want to be able, they saw me walk through this. Yeah. And I stepped out, and it wasn't all pleasant. Right. And some people just did not understand my leaving, and it was lonely, a very lonely time and really scary time. But I stepped out, and I was able to embrace something new. One of my favorite passages in the Bible, Psalm 107, verse 23 and 24. It's actually 23 through 31, but I was sitting in a pastor's office before I sang one time, and on the wall there was this beautiful picture of a ship on a stormy sea, and under the inscription said, Psalm 107, 23 and 24, those who go down to the sea in ships, who do business on great waters, they will see the hand of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. And I thought, that's what I want to see, the hand of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. I don't want to sit on the shore and have somebody come and tell me the stories. Right. I want to get out there. Right. Well, I should have read verse 25 that says, and God caused the waves to mount up to the heavens and down to the depths.
Yeah.
And they staggered around like drunken men at their wits' end, crying out to the Lord in their distress.
Mm.
And here's the good news. The Lord heard their prayer.
Exactly.
He calmed the storm and he brought them to their desired haven. Oh, that men would give thanks to the Lord. I tell you, that's the whole story.
Sure.
And everybody listening to us today, there are three types of people. Those who are about to go into a storm, those who are in the middle of a storm,
Right.
and those who have just come out of a storm.
Right.
And you can usually tell them because they have a big smile on their face.
Right, yeah, they do.
But that's the whole story. And the interesting thing is when you step out in faith, you think, and you have problems, you think, I made a mistake. I made a wrong turn.
You do? You
Verse,
can.
Psalm 107:25 says, and God caused the waves to mount up to the heavens and down to the earth.
Yeah.
Not the devil.
Yeah.
And God leads us right into the storm. Why? Because in the middle of that storm, we are going to cry out to him in our distress.
Right.
And every one of us have been to that place.
Right.
At our wits' end.
Right.
Not knowing where to turn. You get on your knees and you cry out to God. And in that process, we are changed.
Shoals Coffee Co. Coffee Roasters is passionate about two things, people and coffee, because we want to ensure that both reach their full potential. We do our part to improve lives by purchasing coffee beans from women-owned farms in Guatemala and Colombia, along with other sources to bring you the fresh taste and quality product you deserve, while also ensuring that workers are paid fairly and treated well throughout the growing process. 100% of the profit from the sale of Shoals Coffee Co. products is poured directly back into bettering the lives of mothers and babies in communities across the U.S., as well as in the lives of women and children in the countries where we purchase our beans. Our products are available for purchase online at shoalscoffeeco.com and will be delivered right to your door. So buy Shoals Coffee Co. and enjoy your coffee even more, knowing that your purchase is providing for the needs of women and children today, while also impacting lives for generations to come. Shoals Coffee Co. is owned and operated by Shoals Save a Life Incorporated, a pregnancy resource center in North Alabama, and we are proud to be a sponsor of Plain Spoken Grace podcast.
So I grew up in Williamsburg, small Episcopal church, and then as a young man moved to Richmond and was in a very conservative Baptist church. So we opened up the hymnals and we sang. And in many ways that I have some absolutely wonderful, beautiful moments where I've been touched by a hymn at a certain part of my life, or it touches me in a certain way. And then I get involved as a young man in an organization called Young Life, and we go to a leadership conference down in North Carolina. And we're in a room full of adults, and we're not singing out of a hymnal. We're singing praise music, or some people might call it contemporary Christian music, and I'd like you to elaborate on that. But one of the things that I witnessed was that as we were singing, and you're not necessarily reading out of the hymnal and whatever else, there's just all of a sudden the room just kind of filled with the Spirit, and everybody just lets go. And you're singing, whether you sing well or not, loud, you get to the point where you hear the whole room together singing and so forth. And obviously that's what you're aspiring to create when you're performing on that level. So explain to the folks that maybe haven't witnessed that.
Right. Well, there's a lot of the conservative churches, they're used to a song leader and they go through hymns, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But I think a lot of people, when it comes to praise and worship, wasn't even a genre for many years. I mean, in the music, it was songs song singing, hymn singing, a hymn singer.
Yeah.
And we all did that. But the praise and worship, when I was traveling with Terry Law, this evangelist, his wife was killed in a car accident. And this is what led him into doing these praise crusades. And that's when I really learned what I'm doing as a praise and worship leader. But he said he was really kind of healed emotionally and spiritually by offering up a sacrifice of praise, just lifting his hands, giving praise to God in the middle of a very horrible situation. And he says, Don,
in the storm.
Yeah, in the storm.
Right.
He said, I want all of our music changed. Now, mind you, I'd traveled with him for 10 years doing music all over the world. Mm-hmm. I want all of our music changed to worship music. I said, well, Terry, that's what we've been doing, I think. He goes, no, I there's more. I want it all more vertical. Mm-hmm. And so I was intimidated by this.
Yeah.
So I had to go and I went to some conferences, I'm listening, and I go, wow, I don't know. It's kind of mysterious and a little intimidating to me. And yet I started singing those songs a little more vertical oriented. And it really did engage people. I'm not saying all the praise and worship songs are perfect. And in a church these days, you need
there's
to have
nothing
a balance.
perfect about anything that humans are involved in.
You need to have a balance of hymns and, what did Paul say? Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs.
Right.
So there's kind of a blend here. But I get a little concerned these days because we've gotten so good at technology in our churches that we have almost made our worship times a spectator sport.
Well, I'm glad you said that
really
because
sad.
that's my observation. There's a church that we've been to recently where, everybody stand, and then the band, it's like they perform, and it's a concert.
It breaks my heart.
And you can't even hear yourself sing, much less anybody else. Yeah, it breaks mine too.
It's sad. As a musician, okay, I love the technology and the production and everything, but when it comes to worship, a production and pageantry, none of this is good. Technology, it's never going to change a heart or a life.
No.
The presence of God will.
Right.
And so
you've got to let him in the room.
I go to some large churches or even smaller churches, and I watch the people, and they're all kind of standing. Why are we standing? And they're watching a group perform, and it really breaks my heart to see it. I was at Brothers conservative little small Baptist church up there, and the same thing. It's like people. I'm looking around at the people. They're not singing because they can't reach the range or something. Mm-hmm. And I was at this church in Minneapolis, and the worship leader was just playing guitar in a band, and you got to understand, it goes back to knowing your audience.
There you go.
And they're standing there, and I'm sure all those Swedes and Norwegians were kind of standing. I don't know why we're standing, but he said stand.
Yeah.
And he's just singing all these songs. Nobody's singing a word.
Right.
Until he started leading a hymn.
Right.
And then people sang the hymn, and I went to the worship leader. I said, hello, listen to the people.
Yeah, yeah.
They like hymns.
Yeah.
So pay attention to that. But these days, we've gotten so good at technology and production that we really have, worship should be a congregate. It should be everybody engaged in it, everybody singing with it. But we've made it a spectator sport. And people just stand there and they look.
So how do you communicate that to the church? Because I find it pushes some people away. I mean, because
it pushes a lot of people away because and there's a lot of people out there today. They call them the dunners. I'm done with this. I'm done with church. I don't feel I belong anymore.
Right.
The choir's gone. I can't do anything. And I don't. This has nothing to do with my age. I've been doing this a long time. I'm a producer.
Right.
And I pay attention to what the audience is doing. I pay attention to this, but this is the problem. People look at YouTube and they go online and they see a large conference of 18,000 kids,
Yeah.
and they're rocking on a thing, and it's like, and it works for that.
Yeah.
But as then you have your, 500 people or your 200 people out there, it's not going to translate.
Right.
So you have to simply pick the right song in the right key at the right time. And again, the only thing that's going to change a life is the presence of God. So what are you doing to have that moment where the people can interact with the living God?
Yeah.
That's what's going to change a life. And it cannot be about performance and technology.
Yeah.
I say, let's use it all.
Right.
Use it, but realize that it's just a means to the end. If the technology and the production starts driving the event, we've missed it.
Yeah.
It needs to be participatory.
I listened to your conversation with Chester Thompson.
Yeah.
And Chester was talking a little bit, you all both were talking a little bit about overperforming.
Yeah.
Playing something when it wasn't appropriate.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it becomes about, you.
Sure.
He want everybody to say, hey, this is my time to let it shine on the drums or whatever you're doing and so forth. And I don't mean to sound like I'm being overly critical, but it strikes me that there are a lot of folks that are in front of a group in a church where it becomes more about them.
Yeah.
And their performance than it becomes about letting God in the room.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to what I talked about. I spent 10 years on the road doing 3 concerts a day, staying in people's homes. It's all that preparation time where God is taking the rough edges off and building character and understanding how to navigate these moments, and ultimately what I'm trying to do as a worship leader is to help create an atmosphere that welcomes God's presence, because that's the only thing that will change a life. And so it maybe sometimes forget about the drums, forget about all these things. And I say to people, what would happen in your church next week if all the drums were gone, no piano, no guitar, and would you still worship? And you go back to Ezra, I think it's in Nehemiah 6, chapter 6. Ezra found the scrolls, the word of the Lord. And he opened up the scrolls and he read to the people, and the people fell on their face and worshiped simply because they heard the word of the Lord. And it's like, so worship is more than the songs we sing. We've made it into this thing. It's just interesting to me, all through the Gospels, you never hear Jesus talk about the thing that has become so important in our churches. People join a church, leave a church, because they either don't like or they like the worship. And they're gone.
Right.
And yet, I want to say, Jesus, didn't you know that we're going to have these issues to talk about? But he talked about worship to the woman at the well. I just listened to it this morning.
Yeah.
John 4. The hour is coming and now is, and true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. The Father is seeking these. And it's like God is looking for people to worship in spirit and truth. So what is that? He didn't mention a style of music.
No.
The only reference we have to music in all the Gospels is after the Last Supper, they sang a hymn and went out.
Yeah.
So we know that Jesus liked hymns.
Well, and even the instruments that are alluded to in the Old Testament, the lyre and the cymbals and the praise.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like, so I'm not saying they didn't sing, but it's just interesting that Jesus didn't make a big thing about the style of music, but we sure have.
Yeah.
And I just think, I think less is more.
Yeah.
Going to your conversation with Chester Thompson, I think, it's when a lot of churches these days, when they're building their worship teams, they have volunteers coming in, and they got a drummer up there I'm on a stage with 5,000 people.
Yeah.
I'm a guitarist, and I am going to play every lick I know how to play.
Right.
And it does become about them a little bit. And this is where you need strong leadership to just mentor these young musicians coming in and say, no, let's dial it back a little bit. And to Chester Thompson's credit, who has done every big thing you could ever imagine as a drummer with Phil Collins and Genesis and big stadiums, when he plays with Don Moen, I'm singing ballads. I'm a laid back guy. Yeah. If I started to be try to be this real hip, cool guy, people would say, what is with Don?
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't connect. Right. So, but Chester knew enough as a professional musician, and Abraham Laboriel as the bass player, and Paul Jackson Jr. as a guitar player. They're playing to what I was just simple stuff. It's what the song calls for. Right. So when it comes to praise and worship, you need to understand, I think people do get tired of the constant barrage of sound. Right. And I talked to my buddy the other day. They had to leave the church service because they thought they were having a heart attack because the bass drum was so loud. And again, it comes back to understanding.
Well, I looked in the back of the church, and there's an older gentleman that he's got the earmuffs on until the music's done.
Yeah, so those that are leading worship need to really take note of that. And honestly, this comes from the pastor too. Pastors say, I've been to this conference, this is what we're going to be, this is what we're going to do. So they just say, we want to be this church. And I say to people, don't let musical style define your worship. Because if you do, in 2 years, your churches are going to be out of style.
Right.
Styles come and go.
Sure.
And musical styles come and go.
Sure.
So I just think when you plan a worship service, there's a time to step back and read a scripture. There's a time to have a prayer.
Sure is.
There's a time. When is the last time you had a testimony in your church?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. Get up and tell a story. I want this brother to come and share with you the miracle that happened in his life.
Right.
That's all worship. See, again, it's going back to our job is to help create an atmosphere, not manipulate it.
Right.
But help create it where God can come and
bless it.
And be among his people. Psalm 22 verse 3 says, God is enthroned on the praises of his people. Yeah. So when we praise him, and that's ought to be our goal. Yeah. Because when we offer praise to him, he comes to be with us. And when he's with us, he will heal, he will save, he'll deliver, he'll provide for every need. And that should be our goal, not, hey, listen to my next cool song. Right. And all it takes is to open your eyes and look at your audience. Yeah. Are they engaged? Yeah. Don't look at the front 3 rows. Right. Check out the folks that came in the back. Yeah. They're just, I guarantee you, they're just standing. Yeah. They're just looking around. Yeah. And what are you doing that's going to connect with them? Right. I think that's the key.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that's happening we try not to get into the issues of the day so much, but what's happening in the church is that there's I feel like there's almost a pruning that's going on right now, which could lead to revival, and I hope and pray that it does. Yeah. But I do believe that there are a lot of folks that are looking for the authenticity that you're alluding to with that worship.
Well. Yeah, and COVID has forced that. Right. That's what's happened. Right. I did a seminar a few months back. It was in Singapore. They had about 1,000 people. It was a Methodist church. They just said, would you address the topic of how we are supposed to worship in a COVID world? And I said, well, first of all, most church, and to answer your question, yes, I do think revival is coming. Mm-hmm. I think this whole, Romans 8:28 says, all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. God is going to take all that we have been through and cause it to work out for our good and for his glory. But when my church is still worshiping online, And frankly, I'm tired of it.
Right, I understand.
I'm tired of it. And it's like, but a lot of churches are still there all around the world. And so when you're worshiping online, guess what? People are watching a cell phone.
Yeah.
You don't have 1,000 people or 500 people in an audience to play off of what you're doing. When you're in front of an audience, there's a certain energy that can carry you.
Sure.
When you're in front of a camera and you have to rethink everything you're doing. You got to rethink the songs you sing.
Yeah.
Having 5 singers and a full band and lights and smoke is not going to really translate, I don't think, into a computer screen or a cell phone screen.
Right.
So you need to rethink everything. Some churches are not going to survive this.
Right.
The ones that depended so much on audience feedback, but the pastors that are learning how to communicate, you have to boil down the essence of the gospel, what's important. And essentially, in an online COVID world, you're going to somebody's house. It'd be like me going to somebody's house with my guitar. Their people are sitting in their bathrobes or their pajamas in their kitchen table. Yeah. And it's like Don Moen coming in there. They don't need Don Moen in a big band. I just come in and say, hey, Joe, hey, Mary, how are you guys doing today?
Right.
Let's come to the Lord. Let's have a prayer. Lord, thank you for this time together. We invite you to come and be with us. And maybe a song I'll sing is, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. He will be my guide. Hold me closely to his side with love and strength for each new day. He will make a way. He will make a way. See how downplayed that is.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes for Joe and Mary. They're there. And it's like when we're thinking about how to connect with your audience, which is completely different than it was a year and a half ago, you have to rethink how you do everything, how you deliver the most important message in the world, the message of the gospel.
Correct.
And how does a song come in? The songs you used to sing before, maybe don't work now. The 15 people on stage, maybe it's not going to work now. We'll go back to this authenticity. And people are going to connect. You want to connect to their heart. You want to simply create a moment where people can connect with God. And it may be with a testimony, a story, a simple song.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to come out of this stronger than ever.
Right.
And I believe it is a setup for revival. When people ask me where we're going, I say, I think we're going to see a great move of God. I think we're going to see revival.
I do.
Worldwide.
I do.
What other than a pandemic could bring the world to its knees? But I believe with all my heart that God is setting us up for, people are crying out to God, and the people have been through hell. They're losing their jobs. They've lost loved ones. They don't go to church. They're lonely.
Yeah. Their way of life is
kids and students, and it's like, oh my gosh. But in the process, I guess it goes back to Psalm 107:25. God has caused the waves to mount up to the heavens and down to the depths. People are staggering around like drunken men at their wits' end, crying out to the Lord. Yeah. And I see people all on my social media and stuff. They're just, man, the rest of the world, they don't get stimulus checks and stuff like this. They're just crying out to the Lord. But the good news is God will hear our prayer. He will calm the storm and bring us to our desired haven. And I really believe in this process, we are going to be ushered into a great revival.
Right.
And I want to be in the middle of it.
I do too. And that's the reason we started this. That's the reason we started Plain Spoken Grace, because we wanted to have men with a biblical world perspective sharing how they're serving the Lord. And for people who are looking for that in places that maybe they're not seeing it these days, to be touched by that.
Yeah. And when I've done a few men's conferences, And it's an interesting thing. And same with youth conferences too. I don't do a lot of those, but people want to rock them out and just kind of hard hitting at a men's conference. But you know what I found out? There's a club I used to go hunting in Alabama. Now, mind you, the deer in Alabama, they're kind of like dogs.
Yeah.
Sorry, anybody from Alabama, but I'm from Minnesota.
Yeah.
You know, I was 13 when I shot my first huge buck.
Right.
And, you know, they're big up there.
Yeah.
But anyway, still, I love the camaraderie of the men at a hunting lodge, but they had a retreat for men. And it's like, you know what I found out the men want? Intimacy with God.
Yeah.
But we try to dumb it down and say, no, they want some rock and stuff. I don't think so.
I don't either.
I think what the men are looking for is just, I don't need production. I don't need technology.
No.
Give me something that's going to touch my heart.
Fill me in those quiet moments. Yeah.
Yeah, because men don't go there a lot.
Right.
But when men are around men and they have this quiet moment of intimacy with God, it's like, wow, that is something that I've needed.
Right.
You know, I sang at a men's conference at this Methodist church in Mobile, Alabama one time, and as a result of that, we were part of the church for the next 8 years. But they said, "Well, would you come and lead worship?" Well, it was a Saturday morning, and these men came in, wandered in.
Yeah.
There's about 200 of them, I guess, maybe 3, and they were not happy to be there because their wives made them go.
Sure.
They wanted to be on the golf course or anything but at a men's conference.
Fishing.
So they're sitting there like this, and I'm getting up. The first thing, I'm going to lead worship. And boy, I could see those men just folding their arms, and they already decided, I hate Don Moen. I don't even know him, and I hate him.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like the worst thing I could have done, Chip, was to say to the people, to those men, let's all stand up.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we would have had a mass exodus.
Sure.
And yet I didn't. I just came up to the piano. I kind of sat down. I said, "Morning, guys," and they all looking at me like, And I started singing, think about his love. Think about his goodness. Think about his grace that's brought us through. For as high as the heavens above, so great is the measure of our Father's love. Great is the measure of our Father's love. Just a simple thing. Had them just sitting down, and I could see them kind of. Okay. All right. I don't hate him as bad as I thought I hated him. I'm gonna give him another shot. And you know what? I was at a gas station in Mobile, Alabama, probably 8 years after that.
Yeah.
Because we had moved away and to Nashville. I was down visiting, and I was filling up my car, and this guy came over to me and said, "You're Don Moen, aren't you?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah." He said, I remember you sang at a men's conference at our church. And I said, "Yeah, I remember that." He goes, "I wasn't going to have any part of it." But he said, "I remember after you started singing your first song, I thought, maybe I don't," it was the same thing. He said, "Maybe I don't hate him as much as I thought I hated him." And he ended up being a good friend of mine. But it's like, it's interesting. Yeah, you don't need to hype up men. And I think just simply putting it out there, and again, we talked about being a phony. You better not be a phony in front of men. They see it miles away.
Right.
So somebody standing up and being themselves. And then in my role, I found that just simply introducing and not forcing people to do anything, just kind of putting it out there.
Yeah.
You know, and as sitting out in the congregation, I don't like when people tell me to do something.
Yeah. Turn around and tell the person behind you about your, no, thank you.
No, I don't do that really well. So when I lead worship, I try to do what I think I would appreciate out there. And that's the way that's my approach of leading worship. And it goes back to being myself, being authentic. And when I see the guys you have on these podcasts, it's like I was reading through, General Boykin and all these guys. I'm thinking, what am I going to talk about? But it's like everybody has. I can talk about what God has given me to do.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to be General Boykin. I'd like to be that general, that guy, but I can't be.
Right.
But guess what? He can't be me.
No, I was going to say, I don't know how well he'd do at the keyboard.
Anyway, I love it. Yeah, I really love it.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that's also been very interesting about this is to see people who have different skills, different talents, different interests, but most importantly, they want to serve the Lord. And they want to share Jesus Christ and let other men know the reality and the authenticity of what it can mean if He is the center of your life.
Yeah. And I want to encourage people I encourage them to embrace the move of God, embrace what God is going to do next. And by embracing that, you do not have to embrace weirdness or heresy.
Right.
My job at Integrity Music was every 8 weeks we were somewhere. We had a whole series called Hosanna Music, and a whole series of them. My job was to go out and find the worship leaders and find the venues and usually when you found a church that was really preaching and something significant happening, you'd find some fresh songs coming out of that movement. And my job was to go out and just find those songs, and I just part of this whole what we've been through. I found I have a hunger for God to do something new and fresh, and I want to embrace whatever it is He wants to do. Laura and I went to when I was checking out these things one time. I went to a church where there was a revival going on. Yeah. And it was, the product was called I think it was called the Revival at Brownsville. It was down in Pensacola, Florida. Yeah. And my job was to check it out. So we drove over from Mobile and I went to the restroom and our job, I was going to sit at the back.
Sure.
I just have to check this out.
Yeah.
So, nondescript. Well, we went to the restroom. Saw two guys in there. Don, how's it going? Come sit with us. We're in the front. That's the last place I wanted to go. Sure. So I walked through the packed out church, and I'm going down to the third row, and I'm going, oh no! And as I'm walking down there, I see people saying, "Hey Don," and we sat there, and at the end, they said, "Anybody who is here for the first time that wants to come up and be prayed for." And I grabbed Laura's hand and we went up and I said, let's be prayed for. And there was some strange, people, you'd pray for people. Some people fell down and all this stuff. And I stood and Laura stood. Yeah. And I thought, maybe I'm not spiritual enough to be here. But I just heard the Lord speak to me. Don, seek the giver, not the gift. Seek the giver, not the gift. You're not going to embrace heresy or weirdness. Right. And I've always remembered that, and I say that to people when it comes to, I believe revival is coming. There's new things happening, and it's going to happen in every church. But I say to people, you don't have to become weird to embrace what God is doing. Right. As long as you keep your eyes on Jesus, if you start seeking an experience, I want to look like this. I want it to be like this. No. Get your eyes on Jesus, and you simply need to say, Jesus, I want more of you. Right. And keep your eyes on Him.
I want more of you, and I want only you.
Yes.
Right.
And you'll not get into heresy.
Right.
And some people say, whoa, praise and worship. Whoa, we're not going there. But you don't have to embrace something you see on the internet, something you see on YouTube. Yeah. Seek more of Jesus, and if you do that, you will not go into heresy, but you'll be in the middle of what he's doing next. And I, for one, want to be right in the middle of this move of God, which I believe is coming. You know, I wrote a song called "Hungry Heart Is What I Bring to the Table of the King," and there was years I worked on this song, 20 years, and I would sing and I'd look at an audience, and I could just feel there are people out in the audience that are hungry for God. And I started writing this song. The idea was, hungry hearts are here tonight. Da, 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 da. And it was like I was talking about hungry hearts. Mm-hmm. And I never got it finished until this past year. And I thought, no. My pastor said, I want you to believe with us that we're going to move from survival to revival. Mm-hmm. And how does revival start? By being hungry.
Right.
And I had to change the whole format of the song. I said, well, maybe I need to make it personal. I'm hungry.
Right.
And when I did that, the song came real fast. A hungry heart is what I bring to the table of the King. And so it made it personal. Yeah. And I don't know, I'm hungry for God to do something new. Isaiah 43, 18 and 19 says, behold, I will do something new, and now it will spring forth. Will you not see it? Mm. I'll make a roadway in the wilderness and a river in the desert. And as for me, I just want to see what God is going to do next.
Right.
You know, that was kind of the key for writing this song that a lot of people know me for, God Will Make a Way. I wrote it when my nephew was killed in a car accident. Right. And it's like, I sitting on the airplane, just reading from Isaiah 43, I'll make a roadway in the wilderness and a river in the desert.
Right.
Behold, I will do something new. And out came the song and the words for that song. So God's going to do something new in our lives. In the early periods of this pandemic, I said, I'll be glad when things get back to normal. But you know what? Normal wasn't the best thing.
No, I think
there's something better coming.
It's made people pause and realize that. Yeah.
So I want to be in the middle of it.
Absolutely.
And I know you do too.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We absolutely do. Yeah. Well,
I can only be Don Moen.
That's it.
And you can only be Chip.
There you go. That's right. Well, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate what you're doing and your ministry. It's been a blessing to spend some time with you, and I'm really enjoying our time down in Columbia in the Nashville area. Yeah. We're meeting some interesting folks. So bless you and your wife. And thank you very much. And let's lean into that revival.
Yeah.
Because I believe in it.
I'm right there with you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Bless you.
God bless you.